the 6th. There is a vulnerability, or there was, it has now been fixed, a vulnerability in Mend.io's SAML implementation. So Mend.io is a provider of application security solutions, over 1,000 customers. So a decent sized player in this market, provides they use SAMLs, like security assertion markup language, to provide single sign-on authentication across various online services. It appears that the SAML implementation lacked proper scoping, which meant basically that a Mend.io customer could gain access to the data of other customers using the same SaaS service, simply by guessing a valid email address. Now, okay, yes, it's been fixed, which is a good thing, and unsurprising, given the nature of what they're doing. However, the reason that I think it is worth noting is that it's another example of where your cloud services are only as secure as the cloud service provider's implementation of security on their service. So, I'm not advocating cloud is insecure per se. However, it is much harder for you as a consumer of a service to know whether it's been implemented properly than it would be if you run the stuff yourself. So yeah, cloud is extremely convenient. I agree with that. And SaaS services have made the deployment of stuff so much faster. But you do have to be very careful to ensure that you know how your providers are securing and managing your data. And it's very difficult to find out. They didn't, clearly Mend.io weren't aware of the fact that they'd stuffed up their SAML implementation. And the other side of it is, of course, if you're in a multi-tenancy environment and something goes wrong, there is the possibility that your data could be made available to other customers, or other customers' data could be made available to you inadvertently, and so on and so forth. So think these things through would be my recommendation. Don't assume that just because they say it's all good and secure, that it actually is all good and secure. Now, we're all aware of the fact that the LastPass breach in November last year actually resulted in password vaults being exfiltrated, as well as some other data. The assumption, I think, at the time for most people was that, well, it's all encrypted, so it's okay, it doesn't really matter. However, there is an old adage which most people kind of have forgotten or don't think about, or it's not in the forefront of their minds when they're thinking about what happens to compromised encrypted data. All encryption is breakable one way or another. You could literally brute force the encryption itself if you had enough time and enough computing resources. So the important thing to remember is that the value of the data encrypted should have a shorter lifespan than the time it takes to compromise the weakest link in the ability to decrypt the data. So in this case, the weakest link is the vault master passwords. LastPass being like many other password vaults, you have a master password, which is then used to decrypt your vault, where you keep all your secret passwords. There are a handful. The article in Krebs on Security is a very good article. As we all know, Krebs is a very intelligent man who has put a lot of thought into these things. So it's a very, very good, quite long write-up of this. But the failings that appear to have been exploited here are that if your passphrase for your vault was short, and they were allowing at one point 8-character passphrases. Okay, the number of iterations in the encryption cycle that was initially put in place when you set up the vault was low, and originally they were allowing I think 1 to 500 iterations through the encryption algorithm at the LastPass end. I think now it's 5,000 plus that recommended. It is possible then to brute force the master password in relatively short period of time if you've got access to, for example, a crypto mining kit that is basically there designed to hammer through instructions at an incredible rate. It therefore, so the reason for all this is, well, it does appear that some of these vaults have been compromised, and there's been a target on accounts associated with people who have significant cryptocurrency investments. And we are talking here about people who have been secure in what they're doing. This is not people, we're not looking here at people who have been lax in their security. We're talking about people who are technically savvy, long-term investors in cryptocurrency, understand about how to secure their cryptocurrency. It appears that the only thing that these people have in common is that they have all at some point stored their crypto wallet seed in LastPass. So, right, things to think about with this. Firstly, if you were using LastPass up to November last year when the breach happened, and you haven't changed all your passwords, you are at risk. And it doesn't really matter it doesn't really matter how complex those passwords are, because if your master password is compromised, and we're looking at the master password as it was when the vault was stolen. Okay, so change your master password if you're on LastPass still, but you do need to go and change all your passwords in LastPass if you haven't thought this through, because anything which remains the same as it was in November last year could potentially be made available if your previous master password is brute forced. Now, that is, I appreciate, going to be a monumental pain in the arse. I've got hundreds of passwords in a password vault, If I had to change them all, it would take me a long time. But there isn't really much of an option if your password vault's been stolen. So definitely do that. Definitely also review whether your password vault is using the latest, most up-to-date encryption, and reset things like your master password needs now to be long and complex. If there are encryption iterations that your passphrase is put through on the supplier end, make sure that you're using as many iterations as possible, and so on and so forth. There are some good recommendations um, in the article. As I say, long and very detailed write-up of this. There is perhaps no other more serious breach than losing your password vault. So don't rely on the fact that it's encrypted and just ignore it, because all encryption can be broken one way or another. It's just a matter of time, and the time to break these things can be reduced greatly by understanding a little about the state that the vault was in when it was stolen. So it's not millions of years like people tend to assume. Okay, and then finally from me today, a long-running theme of I don't really think that the public sector is particularly good at looking after my data, and I don't like it that the government keeps insisting upon having all sorts of stuff held. Well, as I'm sure you can remember, the Electoral Commission in the UK here was breached in between August 2021 and October 2022. Allowing access to email correspondence and sensitive voter databases and various all sorts of other stuff. The method of the breach and the perpetrators haven't actually been identified. It has come to light, however, that the Electoral Commission failed its Cyber Essentials at around that time. It was due to it was due to recertify in 2022. It failed and then did not reapply for certification. That is interesting, given that there is a move in the government to ensure that all public sector departments, quangos, whatever you want to call these things, are Cyber Essentials certified. So clearly there is a thought being put into this, but the fact that the Electoral Commission got breached, they weren't secure. Cyber Essentials, for those that don't know, is a UK government recommend. It's not run by the government, but it's a government kind of sponsored scheme to check for really, really basic cyber hygiene. We're talking the simplest of simple stuff. It's self-certified as well. Cyber Essentials Plus does involve a little bit more in the way of actual checking by real people. But we're not talking ISO 27000 series or looking to be compliant with NIST frameworks or anything else. This is really, really basic stuff. And the Electoral Commission failed it and was breached. Take from that what you will, but don't trust the government with your data. But then you all know that that's my opinion on these things. So I'm going to be taking a short break from delivering these daily briefings. So for the rest of this week and for next week, you will have the pleasure of Rich Benfield. you'll have the pleasure of Rich Benfield doing these. So I hope you have a great rest of the week. Hope next week goes well for you. And I will be back on the following Monday.